Have you ever seen a UFO? Now keep in mind, when we say UFO, we don't necessarily mean alien or extraterrestrial ET type stuff. We just mean an unidentified flying object. It turns out that UFOs are one of the most controversial subjects that you'll see tackled in fringe literature. And often these things are dismissed as just a bunch of people who are crackpots or something making up stories. But is that true? Not all the time, and not exactly. Here are 4 cases of still unexplained UFO sightings. Number 1, the famous Battle of Los Angeles in 1942. Now, it's not surprising if this is something you've never heard of, but it is a strange story. Here's what goes down. On February 24th of that year, Naval Intelligence says that they're expecting an attack of some sort within about 10 hours. And later that evening, flares and blinking lights are sighted near defense plants. But for a while, nothing else happens, so the alarm is stopped. At least that is until the wee early morning hours of February 25th, the next day, when an unidentified object was reported 120 miles off the coast of California. Radar followed this object, whatever it was, till it was just a few miles off of the coast, and then boom, the regional controller ordered a blackout on the information. And here the story takes a lot of twists and turns because official versions of this don't add up. Here's what happens. The mysterious object that was tracked at sea somehow disappears. People in Long Beach started reporting seeing different planes in the sky. A Coast Artillery colonel claimed that he saw 25 planes at about 12,000 feet altitude. But here's the thing. The Air Force said that there were no planes at all. The military said that the reports of enemy planes were greatly exaggerated, and the Navy didn't completely agree with either of them. So what happened? Well, at this point, new information has become available in the intervening decades, and we have learned more. A lot of people are guessing that these were some sort of secretive weather balloon program, right? Which is an explanation that might sound familiar to some people. But there are other alternative explanations, of course. There are people saying that a Japanese fleet attacked the United States in this area, in Los Angeles, or some other enemy power attacked. But the question would be then, why does it seem that neither side suffered casualties? Is it possible that the strobe lights tracking these things in the sky were hitting flares in the air, and that those were mistaken for the lights of enemy craft? Well, that sounds possible, but the truth is, at this point, we don't know, and it remains unexplained. 2. Japan Air Flight 1628. On November 17th, Captain Kenju Terauchi was flying with 2 other pilots from Iceland over Alaska with a cargo of wine. Basic trip, everything's fine. These guys are experienced. At 5 p.m., however, they report seeing a strange light kind of down and to the left. This captain, being experienced, knew that these could be military craft because Alaska and Russia are so close together that the U.S. Air Force would be patrolling on a regular basis. So he ignored this craft and continued on their usual flight path as directed by Anchorage. But he noticed something else. These lights weren't changing direction or going somewhere else. They were following Japan Air Flight 1628. And this is a weird thing because he reported it to the FCC, to ground control, and they asked him to describe it. So we have this guy describing what was going on. Now, there are some holes in this story that are pretty concerning. A confidential report that later was published that shows this captain was what was known as a UFO repeater, or he repeatedly saw UFOs and associated them with personality traits, right? Like, oh, I see the mothership and I feel that these lights are over here in the dark easterly corner of the sky because they do not want to be seen. And 2 other planes were scrambled to the Flight 1628's position to see if they could find these objects, and apparently they did not, if that is, you believe the official story. 3 takes place on an island off Brazil known as Corrales in October to December of 1977. A doctor there named Wellade Cecim Carvalho found 35 or more cases of people who were all telling a similar story. They saw a light, and it wasn't high in the sky. It was, a few feet around the ground. It shot a ray at them. They started suffering burns, dizziness, nausea, vomiting. She herself said that she was caught in this light. Now, the thing about these personal injuries is that there is proof these people were injured. So much proof, in fact, that this caused the Brazilian government to launch what they called Operation Saucer, the first kind of Project Blue Book of its kind in this country. One of the reasons that these events on this island Corrales came to light was through the actions of a Captain Holanda. He gave an interview, most famously in a Brazilian monthly publication called Revista UFO. And in this, he disclosed that he was the officer charged with investigating some of these activities and events, which the locals often called chupa chupa. And in these interviews, he tells stories of the different events they witnessed and that he personally witnessed, and people he spoke with, and people his subordinates interacted with. There's one more disturbing turn to the events of Corrales. The program was canceled, Operation Saucer, in 1978. That Revista UFO interview occurred in 1997. Shortly after giving that interview, Captain Holanda was discovered on the second floor of his house by his daughter. He was dead, hanging from his bathroom belt. And the last one for today, the Kecksburg, Pennsylvania incident, 1965. Numerous locals report something shooting from the sky and then apparently slowly settling down on the ground. The area is cordoned off, right? And the newspapers are going crazy. The local government is going crazy. The government has already cordoned off the area because they just assume that the military is going to come check this out, right? Could this be a Soviet weapon of some sort, a satellite falling from the sky? But things start to get a little weird. A man named John Murphy apparently witnessed the area being sealed off and didn't buy the official story. And the official story here, by the way, changes over time. The first official version of events said that there was nothing in the woods. Crazy thing. Go back to your TV dinners. But John Murphy didn't believe that. He actually had a photograph of something that had landed. The second explanation was that a meteorite had hit the area, which is possible, maybe even plausible, and this seemed to satisfy most people. At least that is until the case began to reappear in the public eye in the 90s. But wait, there was one more change. In 2005, NASA claimed that they had studied fragments of this object and confirmed that it was a Russian satellite that had fallen to Earth. This way, the secrecy at the time would make sense. However, they also said that they lost the records of this study in the mid-1990s, and this contradicts some of the conversations that NASA officials had earlier had with journalists and the public. So then the official story here, at least for now, currently, until the version changes again, is that a Russian satellite, most likely Cosmos 96, crashed into Kecksburg, Pennsylvania on December 5th. Not everybody believed that. In fact, John Murphy, the journalist we mentioned earlier, began making a documentary called Object in the Woods, where he took interviews from various people, gathered any evidence that he could find, and tried to solve the mystery of this thing locals described as an acorn-shaped object or craft of some sort. At least that was until he was visited by two men in black suits who went into a back room with him and met for about 30 minutes. And he still did come out with this documentary, but it removed everything else that he had been working on, and according to his wife, he was pretty upset about it. His wife said that he became despondent, refused to ever talk about what went down in that conversation or what he saw that December 5th. In 1969, he was killed in an apparent hit and run while on vacation in California. After his death, his wife stated that he had been warned that there would be grave consequences if he ever produced evidence of the stuff he had seen that night, including a photograph he had of the object. Oddly enough, in the Project Blue Book case file on the Kecksburg incident, a photograph is mentioned, but it's not part of the official reports. Thanks so much for watching. We'd like to look at these UFO cases and more in further depth, so check out the comments and tell us which cases have fascinated you over the years. Now, we'll probably revisit Operation Saucer and the Kecksburg incident at some point if that interests you, but this week we're going to look at something else in our next video. Is your government building UFOs?